Well, hello there, and welcome to day 49 of A Film a Day. And after two successive films of, varying quality and quite in-depth discussion, I thought it was time I deployed my fun film of the week. So, I decided, and this was sort of part of my long-term plan, but I have decided to go back to the beginnings of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and begin all the way back in the halcyon days of 2008 with Iron Man. This film is fantastic. Full stop. It is just fantastic. And it's easy to say when we've had 13 years of time to build this universe of characters. It's obviously based on 6-7 decades worth of comic book source material, but in itself it could have been a very weak start, or it could have been a mediocre start, or it could be one of those situations where when we looked back we kind of went, well, it's not that good compared to where it ended up. But I don't know, the ingredients were all in place. It was beautifully put together, even as a standalone superhero film. If the Marvel Cinematic Universe had never existed and it had just been Iron Man, and then they'd gone on to make other films and other franchises, I still think this would hold up as a great film in itself. I think it really works around the fact that Robert Downey Jr. has such a charisma and natural charm in the way he plays Tony Stark. He was almost born to play this role. You know, considering where he was in his career, this was just after, he'd had his prestigious success, then he'd gone into his very incredibly hard times in his personal life. So he had something to prove. He could have sleptwalked through it, but he just came out swinging. He really was just like, nope, I'm gonna make this part my own from day one, so that when people now think Iron Man, they think Robert Downey Jr. It's very hard to talk about this film because, frankly, it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been in so the public eye for the last decade and a half that there's not that much new or insightful that can be said that hasn't been covered time and time again in that film, and all the successive films that have led up to this grand epic narrative that we've seen. I suppose it's interesting where we're at now. We're 6 episodes into WandaVision. We've had Paul Bettany playing the character of Vision in this, and of course all the way back from Age of Ultron. But the fact that they cast him to simply play a voice part that was fairly minor at the time, and the fact that he evolved the character in a way that where we are with him now, we've seen this character grow and change. He went from Jarvis to becoming, to the birth of Vision. We've seen the tragedy of Vision, and then this dark and twisted narrative that we're getting with WandaVision, where just to sort of cover that series, the fact that we have in the early episodes this 60s, 70s sitcom situation where Paul Bettany really gets his chance to stretch his legs and be comedic. And then you get the darker side of it, and him shows range. And the fact that goes all the way back to him doing a voice part. And frankly, when you watch the first Iron Man film, his voice part isn't even that big. It's not like in the later films, where he has, a real back and forth with Tony Stark. He has a very small role in the film. It's funny, really, looking at some of the side characters, like Happy Hogan, who, frankly, considering again how many films he's been in, between the Iron Man films and the Spider-Man films, he is such a small role in this, really. Such a small role. It's remarkable. I know in Iron Man 2 they beef him out a bit, but he's practically a glorified cameo, which is quite remarkable. Of course, we have the strange situation of one of the early stage recastings of a Marvel Cinematic Universe character with Rhodey War Machine, who of course will, from Iron Man 2 on, will be played by Don Cheadle. And it's quite funny now that obviously he's getting his own series with Armor Wars coming next year. But the fact that I do feel terribly bad for Rhodey 1, as you might call him, because, even the fact when he turns and you see the War Machine armor and he just says, "Next time, baby." And there is no next time. Not for him, at least. In terms of the narrative itself, I mean, it is interesting where it is, to sort of take a more serious filmic approach to it. The fact that they decided to use an Iron Man film to really make a commentary on war profiteering is quite a risky, dangerous thing to do. The fact that, this is between Batman Begins and Dark Knight, so really that darker, more intense superhero film really hadn't arrived yet. If you sort of hand wave the early Burton stuff, but the idea that we were in a particular part of the culture, post Iraq and Afghanistan, or in the midst of, and a point in which American patriotism was starting to be really re-perceived. And they used this narrative to explore the idea of personal responsibility for warfare and for foreign actions by both governments and individuals. It's a heavy narrative to do for, again, this what could have been a silly, practically children's comic book film, and it really sort of matures it in a way that goes, oh, comic book films can be for adults, can be in for anyone. Jeff Bridges, who is very good as Obadiah Stane. I do think it's a shame, because there was no way of telling that narrative without the case of obvious villain being obvious villain. But I do think they do try to sort of subvert our expectations of who the main villain is, in terms of we're thinking it's something to do with the character who we encounter in the camp, when, of course, the second to third act twist is that Obadiah Stane is the main villain, he is the warmonger, and yes, comic book fans would already know that, but they do try to sort of build this relationship where you're not sure how villainous he's going to be in this film. And I do think, again, Jeff Bridges, considering it could have been a sleepwalk part, really does do these wonderful transitions from charismatic, friendly, almost fatherly kind of figure, and with few subtle gestures goes straight to villainous, dangerous. And I think that, that there was a decision made to bring in this caliber of actor into this film and have them try their best to do that, and I think that was solid. Anyway, yes, what a great start. We are going to cover the Incredible Hulk, even though obviously it's a question about whether that's the main MCU, but I am going to cover that at some point, and I'm going to continue through and slowly work my way through the MCU casually. It's not going to be a week-to-week thing, but we'll see how it goes. In the same way as the musicals or some of the other films I've covered. Anyway, I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.